Okay, who's here? Is everyone here? Where is Councilman Menon? Oh. Councilman Menon, are you ready?
Not from New York. I sent you pictures of New Jersey.
Hold on, Councilman.
You ready for new? Good. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, PL 1975, Chapter 231, the notice requirements have been satisfied. The meeting dates for the year are confirmed at the annual meeting, are posted on the public bulletin board in the lobby of the Municipal Center, and published in the record within the first 10 days of the new year. Salute to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Omar, could I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Dayton?
Here.
Councilmember Grossman?
Here.
Councilmember Menon? Here. Councilmember Michaels?
Here.
Councilmember Dr. O'Connor?
Here.
Councilmember Park? Here. Mayor Zena?
Here.
Okay, I have, Councilor, one revision to the agenda. It's regarding the handicap baths, senior baths, the handicap bathrooms in the Senior Citizen Center. We had pulled that from the consent agenda because the pricing details were simply not worked out. And so we're not going to make this grant cycle, and we're not sure that the grant in this particular scenario was worth waiting for because of the pricing. There'll be more grants in the early part of the new year, and then we'll get this back on the table again. Are there any other agenda changes?
Not that I am aware of, Mayor.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of November 9th, 2021 regular meeting and November 23rd, 2021 special regular meeting?
So,
Have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Voice vote.
Excuse me. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, wonderful. Okay, we have a proclamation that I'm going to read. Bear with me 1 second. We had our Youth Services Director, Mark Slauson. I don't know, is Mark on the, is he out there? I don't know. Perhaps not.
I don't see him there.
You don't see him? Okay, so Mark Slauson served the borough for 32 years as our Youth Services Director, and he has recently retired, and we put together this proclamation to recognize him, and I'm going to read it through. Whereas Youth Services Director Mark Slauson has been employed with the borough of Tenafly for over 32 years. Whereas throughout his tenure with the borough, Mark helped increase the attendance at the youth center, started fundraising activities, and was involved in the effort to have the youth center built in its current location in the municipal center complex. Whereas in 2000, Mark started the Tenafly Teen Summer Camp, and in 2004, the youth center was awarded the Bergen County Recreation New Facility of the Year. Whereas Mark contributed his knowledge and experience to host a COVID-free summer camp, and in 2021 kept the youth center open and thriving during the pandemic while maintaining all state, county, and local COVID restrictions. Now therefore be it resolved that on behalf of the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Tenafly, we appreciate Mark Slauson's service to the community for over 3 decades. During his tenure, Mark has exhibited the utmost dedication and professionalism on a daily basis. Best wishes in your retirement, Mark, and please know that you will be missed by your Borough Hall family. So thank you very much, Mark Slauson. I just want to make a personal note. All 4 of my kids, from the 31-year-old down to the 16-year-old, all use the youth center activities there, and thank you for that, Mark. Okay. Okay, next we have a presentation. It's a cannabis discussion. Councilman Michaels, did you put this on the agenda, right?
yes, Mr. Mayor.
Would you like to say a little something and make an introduction? Please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Mr. Ed DeVoe, who leads the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association, had a chance to meet with Ed when we were at the League of Municipalities and shared a lot of information with me. If you remember a couple meetings back, the council asked for further information and someone to come and provide some Q&A to our discussion. And I thought, and I'm very much appreciative of Mr. DeVoe coming to speak with us tonight. So, Mr. DeVoe, thank you so much. I give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. I really appreciate this opportunity. I have a brief presentation that I provided to our host. I don't know if you're able to bring it up or if you received it.
It's coming up now.
So in the time, so I have the pleasure of serving as the president of the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association. We are the state's first and largest trade association that was founded 5 years ago to help the state develop a responsible, sustainable, diverse, profitable cannabis industry. As what I have now called us the State Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, we serve as a resource not only to current license holders, but to future applicants and all of the ancillary businesses that are seeking to add to the cannabis industry in New Jersey. We also are delighted to be a resource not only for the legislature, but for the Cannabis Regulatory Commission as well. So what I'd like to do is, if you go to the next slide, what I'd like to do is start with what I call how we got here, and then kind of talk about where New Jersey is today. So the how we got here, one has to look at the cannabis policy in the U.S. Going back 90 years, and what prompted all of the cannabis advocacy that we witnessed and experienced today. The plant was not criminalized because of public safety. The plant was not criminalized because of public health. The plant was criminalized because of who used it. Public record shows that the Bureau of Narcotics pushed for the criminalization of the plant because of who used it. So over the years, not only do we have legislation and regulation and laws that criminalize the plant, but we had laws that effectively weaponized the plant. It was the enforcement was targeted, and it was targeted towards poor people and minorities. The sad fact in New Jersey was that we had reached the levels of poor people and minorities being arrested 3 to 4 times more than their majority counterparts. This prompted tons of advocacy across the country to change cannabis laws and to make sure that the laws were just and, in fact, move towards legalizing the plant. Also during that time, over the decades, medical advocacy became prominent as doctors, scientists found out that the human body is, in fact, hardwired for cannabis. I use that term hardwired because scientifically, the body has an endocannabinoid system. That means we have hundreds of receptors that respond positively to THC and other facets of the cannabis plant. So this legalization started across the country, California being the first state, and other states following suit. We come into recent years, most notably we look at California, up to Colorado, Las Vegas, and other states where they have not only legalized the plant for medical purposes, but they legalized for adult use as well. When we look at New Jersey, it was 11 years ago that New Jersey actually legalized the plant for medical purposes. So we had a medical program in existence for 11 years ago. In the last 11 years, the State Department of Health has actually provided licenses to purveyors, grow, process, and sell or dispense the plant to medical patients. There are currently 12 license holders that are active in the state, and most recently, at the program that Bob I'll get to that in a moment, we now have other medical license holders doing cultivation or doing processing and will not be able to dispense medical cannabis. How did all of this change in New Jersey? The legislature for the last 40 years attempted to pass legislation and failing to do so, turned the question over to the voting public. In November 2020, the voting public overwhelmingly changed the Constitution, voted to change the Constitution of New Jersey to allow adult use cannabis and expand the medical program. Since that time, going back to just February of 2021, the legislation created the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, or the CRC. The CRC had 180 days from February until August to actually draft legislation, regulation that would govern the state's medical and adult use programs. And part of that regulation, part of the legislation, allowed municipalities to opt in or opt out of the expanded medical and adult use cannabis programs. Many municipalities decided to opt out because there was no regulation in place. So since August, and these are round numbers, using 565 municipalities, roughly 100 opted in and 500 opted out. So what we have today, in fact, beginning tomorrow, based on regulation, is the opportunity to have adult use cultivators, adult use processors, and more state testing labs enter into an application portal and seek licenses to provide those functions. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So what we have is, in fact, legal adult use cannabis today. Retail dispensaries actually began to apply for licenses into March of 2022. But again, as of tomorrow, you will have an application portal open for cultivation, processing, and for testing laboratories. Now I know it just wasn't regulation or the lack of regulation that caused some communities to opt out of the adult use program that had been adopted by the state. Some things that have emerged as myths across the country, and for years there were myths that were developed by opponents to legalizing cannabis. And what we've seen since legalization, since other countries have in fact been engaged with the actual studying of the plant, looking at medical efficacy, expanding adult use in a state-regulated environment, what we've determined is that the world does not end with legalization. And so I just wanted to share some of the facts that actually support why legalization is in fact being sustained as a policy and practice across the country. The first fact, teen use actually goes down in states where cannabis is legalized. Whether it's because the plant's no longer cool, because we're not seeking it anymore. Parents are now partaking of the plant either in its flower form or as an edible. It's not cool. So maybe teens aren't using it for that reason. A legalized market also makes it really difficult. Although an illicit market doesn't go away, but it does make it increasingly difficult to get the plant off the market. So teenage use, I know we are all concerned, and I am as well as a parent, unsatisfied with the fact that teenage use is actually going down in the states where cannabis is legalized. Another issue that is sometimes brought up, mainly in terms of question, is what happens with drivers and driver offenses. Isn't there a way to tell someone is driving under the influence. So while there is no breathalyzer today, to determine if somebody is actually high, part of the legislation and calls for the development of drug recognition experts, or DREs, across the state. So a lot of the tax funding that we're talking about gaining through a legalized market and expanding the market, a lot of those funds are going to develop DRE, drug recognition experts, who will be providing cognitive testing to see if someone is impaired while driving.
And Miss,
Although that's the case,
can I ask a question about that? Hi, this is Councilwoman Dayton. For the drug recognition experts, would that person be provided to the communities, or would they have to be someone within the police force? Do you know?
the community would recommend who their DREs are, that they would recommend that person to attend the training to receive that certification.
So it's just a certification, it's not anything beyond that?
No, it's just a certification.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and I apologize, please, stop me if you have a question along the way. So, what we've determined over the last decade or so with the states that have legalized cannabis, there is no statistical increase in terms of traffic accidents in big towns. So essentially, there's the insurance industry launched its own study and had discovered that it was a slight increase, an increase of 3%, but then followed that finding with the fact that that is a normal increase, provided the fact that distracted driving is increasing. The use of cell phones, people texting, and other bad driving habits contribute to increases every year. There is no statistical difference in states where cannabis has been legalized, and somehow we see a huge increase in terms of accidents or fatalities. And another difference in terms of some of the record keeping is simply that now people are asking, or officers are now asking the question, have you used cannabis? Now, as a quick digression, cannabis in its actual inherent chemical, THC, remains in the human system anywhere from weeks to months. And so someone may have actually cannabis, but it may have been weeks ago, and they're not driving impaired. But THC may be present in the system. But again, there is no evidence that traffic accidents or fatalities increase because cannabis is legal. Next slide, please. A lot of communities are concerned about crime rates. The fact is, legalizing cannabis does not increase crime rates. In fact, if you think about it, being in front of or near a dispensary is probably one of the safest places you can. There are regulations in prescription that pertain to the medical operations that's been with us for a decade, that provide that there's cameras outside, that there's physical in terms of security personnel inside and possibly outside, that there are cameras inside the facilities that are connected to the state police visual or surveillance systems. So there is a high level of security, higher than most places. I would equate it to that, thanks if not greater. So crime does not increase simply because we legalize cannabis, and dispensaries and cultivation facilities and processing facilities tend to have a high degree of security, which in fact deters crime.
Mr. DeVoe, if we can,
Yes.
I just want to make a recommendation, just because I'm very eager for the council to be able to ask you questions. If it's okay, I'd love to open the floor and see if you'd be able to answer some of the questions of the council. Again, if you remember, coming out of our last session, a couple meetings back, you know, a number of the council people really wanted to have sort of a up or down vote. Either way is fine, and the feedback was we wanted to get our questions answered. So that's what I was hoping, that at least this would start, if not complete a lot of those questions that the council has.
Who has questions? Councilwoman Davis.
Thank you. Now, if you read through the chairs and, based on that, recommendation, I do want to add this then with respect to regulation. When the state passed its regulation, it provided for 6 licensing categories. Municipalities have the opportunity to either adopt one, none, or all 6, or some variation of the licensing categories that exist. Those licensing categories are cultivation or growing, processing or manufacturing, warehousing and distribution, transportation, which is home delivery, retail or dispensary, retail with consumption labs. So those are the 6 licensing categories that municipalities can view. And there's a in terms of whether they feel comfortable with one or all of those categories. And again, they can adopt some combination thereof. Thank you, Councilman.
Council President Davis.
Thank you for the presentation. Our council has spent a long time going through the cannabis legislation. We actually had a subcommittee, I hope Adam told you, it's an enormous amount of work to educate us on our options. My question is something that we didn't know the answer to. There's a conflict right now between state and federal laws. So can you talk a little bit about that and see what direction it's going into?
Sure, thank you, Councilwoman. The difference between federal and state. So today, federal law still has cannabis as an illegal substance and as a Category 1 substance. What has happened over the years is that the country's nation's attorney generals have, in fact, adopted memos. Maybe you've heard of things like the Cole memo or the Sessions memo. And these are memos that are drafted by the state's top law enforcement official, the nation's top law enforcement official, who says that essentially we are not going to vigorously pursue or prosecute low-level cannabis cases. So in the instances where states have in fact adopted legal cannabis either for medical purposes or for adult use purposes, there has been no enforcement on the part of the federal government. When it comes to banking, Congress and the Senate have been working on something called the State Banking Act, which in fact would eliminate all barriers to safe banking and insurance when it comes to cannabis operation. So as of now, there is a myth that no banks do cannabis banking. That's not true. Banks do cannabis banking. They have to charge exorbitant fees to do that banking because of all the paperwork, the actual paperwork that they do. But there are banks that do cannabis banking. There are credit unions that do cannabis banking. And so the country moving away from that all cash business into becoming more mainstream when it comes to things like banking and insurance. But as of today, officially, is it still illegal at the federal level? Yes. But the attorneys general have in fact adopted policies and continue to do so where enforcement is not at the priority.
Can I just ask a follow-up? The Safe Banking Act, which I hadn't heard of it, that was going to be a follow-up question. I'm glad you addressed that. What is the status of that? Do you know?
So the Safe Banking Act at this point is, it was, as of last week, in the National Defense Authorization Act. And since that time, it has been removed. But the Safe Banking Act itself has passed the House. And so they're working now on trying to adopt a Senate version so that it can pass before the end of the year. At this point, it's anyone's guess as to what happens.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Questions from other council members? Any questions over there?
Actually, I have a question. How big, so a couple that are interesting to me, I have a lot more questions on the retail side of it. Let's call it consumer-facing side. Let's put that to the side for a second. The first couple that you mentioned, the grow or the processing, that would never touch, no consumer is walking into anything like that. How big does that facility have to be? Does it have to be, 7 football fields for it to be economical, or could it be, I don't know, quarter acres? I'm making that number up. Do you have any sense of that?
Yes, it does. So thank you. So when it comes to size of the facilities, in New Jersey's early days, with vertical licenses, meaning that the license holder controls the seed to sale process. So one company that controls seed to sale. In that instance, those license holders were investing in and creating very large facilities for cultivation because they had to rely on their own supply to process and to provide their own dispensaries. What we've done since then in terms of policy, first and foremost to help consumers in the medical community is that they have allowed the dispensaries and the cultivators to product sales. So Curaleaf can now work with Green Thumb Industries and TTI, and they can provide each other product in order to provide good quality and good quantity to cannabis patients. Now, looking at the adult use market, and with a sense of social justice being woven into the development of the legislation and regulations, there is something called a micro license. Micro licenses are smaller licenses for smaller facilities that are dedicated to minorities, youth, and veterans. Those facilities aren't limited in terms of their size. So, for example, a micro license cultivation facility can only have a canopy or grow space of 2,500 square feet, 2,500 square feet. It has additional business plan, which might be for 3,000 square feet. But in terms of canopy space or floor space, it is only 2,500 square feet. If successful, that license can then move up to 5,000 square feet. So today, the answer to the question is it varies, and it will vary going forward.
Super helpful, thank you.
So, any other questions from council members? Yes, Council President Tate.
I have a question about products with THC in it. So currently THC in like edibles or creams, that is considered part of this. It's not considered in the CBD movement, right?
Thank you for the question. There is a difference between CBD and THC. CBD is a product of hemp and is non-intoxicating. Now, I've never used hemp products myself. Some people swear to it that hemp cream eases arthritic pain and eases the problems that arise with skin ailments like eczema. And so people will purchase CBD and CBD today. THC products. THC is the chemical that is in fact intoxicating. So it is in fact included today in edibles and ingestibles. So when I think ingestibles, they include tinctures or liquids or sprays. They are in oils as well as in the actual plant or the bud or the flower. So THC infused products are in fact regulated. If you go to a medical dispensary, you will find products there, the oils, the tinctures, the ingestibles, the edibles that have THC in them. And the level of THC will vary from product to product. With some instances require more than others. And so that is the value of having dispensaries, which is why I don't see medical dispensary is going away. Medical dispensary will be there because in case we can have a consultation as to how much THC, what THC-based product is best for them. If I might take this further, when it comes to edibles and ingestibles, one of the rules that the CRC adopted that advocates were not happy with was the fact that edibles and ingestibles could not have what I call a culinary look. That edibles and ingestibles had to be clinical in terms of their appearance. So in other words, now there are no gummies, no gummy bears that are approved in terms of regulation. The only edibles and ingestibles that are permitted are those that resemble something clinical needs. So for example, if you remember the soubrette for sore throats, throat lozenges, so you can have a lozenge, not something that resembles something culinary.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Councilman Michaels, what is kind of the ask and the next step here, and what do we want to do? What would we like, how the council should pursue here?
So honestly, I'm a bit surprised there were so few questions. But I'm assuming since there are few questions, no one has any more questions, and they're ready to take a vote on where we are. So I guess I put up for the next meeting, let's put up a vote. What I would do, to Mr. DeVoe's point, I don't think there's a binary, should we do it or should we not? I think it needs to be across those 6 lines, unless people want to bucket them. I don't know if the council has a feeling on one being more or less interesting to them. But I put up a vote in the new year, for the middle of January or early February.
So, in other words, to consider the different of the 6 options?
Correct, to have an up or down vote on if this is something that we want to look at. Sorry, if this is something we want to proceed with.
So,
if the answer is yes, then obviously there are a number of steps. I'm sure we'd ask Wendy. I assume from a planning board perspective, you want to, before you approve anything, you pick an area where you want to do it. There's a process. But what I want to do is, if this council is against it, then we don't need to put any more time into this.
So I'm just going to step out and say I'm not sure if we're ready to say we're against it, or if the council is ready to say they're against it or for it. It's probably the next step is to add it to be considered for a full discussion.
Well,
What would you guys like to do?
I would love to hear from the subcommittee, what they think might be a realistic possibility here in town. I love that option. Like, I don't think we should go through all the different 6 licenses. Some of them are clearly not meant for Tenafly. But I'd love for the subcommittee to say, it's possible to have license A, I'm just throwing it out there, right now, and it would go in this spot, and do you want to consider approving that? I don't think I just want to have a generic conversation about do we like that or not. I just think that's too amorphous here. Like, I think that maybe the planning board does that.
I think Councilman Grossman has.
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Councilman.
Yeah, so, first of all, Mr. DeVoe, thank you very much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. So, here's my conundrum. This is a great argument, and when I break all 5 categories out, it's a great argument for legalization of cannabis. Cannabis is now legal. So I guess, really what I'd like us to focus on is specific benefits to the municipality, rather than generalities of, yes, teen use drops in states where it's legalized, no statistical, those are all great arguments why New Jersey passed this 2-1. And by the way, there's varying, having looked at this, there are different articles, for example, just on the traffic accidents. If we wanted to focus on that's from the Washington Post 2017, but the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety this year found a totally reverse finding. So, but it's legal. I guess the question is, what specific to Tenafly? Because that's all we're really talking about here. And I don't think this conversation goes in that direction. And I'd love to have the conversation in that direction and have that, but this is not really it.
So, go ahead. Wait, Lauren, I'm just gonna ask you. Dan, do you have comments?
Everyone on the council knows I would legalize all 6 licenses, so nothing to add to that.
And to Councilman Carson's point, I think that's I'll argue it up to the council to bring our thoughts, our pros and cons to that meeting, and that's where hopefully we're all open-minded, we all hear each other, we all agree or disagree with the elements of it, and then you put up a vote, and whoever, convinces you or for or against something,
Yeah,
you provide the answer.
but somebody from the industry not explain why cannabis should be legalized, but why it makes sense for Tenafly. And we can sit here and
But I
debate
think
it,
it's for us
but
to do that. It's not going to be for a third party to pick Tenafly per se. I mean, I can tell you that why we do it. We do it for, there's the economic benefit. We do it for there are places, Councilwoman O'Connor and I were just looking at just open plots of land, and I'm surprised and shocked by how many just parking lots we have in town. So, it fills spaces that are not going to be used for other things, and that's obviously, we could talk through it when we have that conversation, but I think it's for us to bring forward those pros and cons, and then for us to decide.
do we have enough factual knowledge on which to argue pros and cons? I guess that's my question.
But I think that's for the 6 of us to do our own diligence to convince someone one way or the other.
All right, let's hear from the other 2 council members who haven't spoken for a second. Councilwoman Dr. O'Connor, please.
Yeah, so, again, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. I did just want to say that it was July of this last year that we took that vote, if I'm correct, about observing what occurs in the towns that have brought it into their town, their economic benefits, different things like that, or any challenges that they might have run into. We're only in December. So I guess for me, the purpose of giving it time to see where it shook out, which really was what we had decided to do in July, I would just think that we don't have to have more discussions till we have more information, and I think that would be really not before we get a sense of where it came out in those towns. I'm not even sure, quite frankly, if those towns have even broke ground on any.
Nothing will happen until March. So it's going to be years before, and again, that's a totally cool answer.
Yeah.
What I drive this council to is I feel like we bring topics up for months and years and decades.
All right, Councilman Menon.
So I think Councilman Grossman's point about how it's relevant to Tenafly brings up, something that seemed to have been, an exercise that was taken, but then it seems to have been overlooked or just disregarded, which is, there was an attempt to go out to the public and get feedback from the public. And we got some good feedback. We got, I think it was 70 or so, responses from residents. And, nobody took that into account, in my memory. But maybe we need to draw the residents in a little more. And make sure that this is something the residents are interested in, that they're happy with. I mean, we did this with the gun shop discussion. People were brought in from the public. This is another issue that is controversial enough for the town, so that we don't just, make a decision among the 6 of us, or the 7 of us.
That's why we voted.
I think we do need to do a lot more of that, the discussion part of it.
Okay, so a couple of things I'm hearing here. Thank you, Councilman. A couple of things I'm hearing is the council wants to make this particular decision or set of decisions on their own without, outsiders, consultants, et cetera, making that decision for the council. I'm also hearing that the council needs to do some more studying of which of these 6 categories are in the best interest of the borough. So, I mean, does it make sense to get the cannabis committee together to put together some detailed recommendations for the council, Adam? So that you have something to vote on?
I honestly don't believe this council wants to vote on it, and I wouldn't waste any further time.
Other council members, how do you feel?
I'm with Adam on this. I think
the council split, Adam.
Go ahead. Okay, so Dan was first, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Dayton, go ahead.
I'm with Adam on this. I think, for it or against it, I think we should put a proposal on zoning on where we want licenses, what the licenses mean, and go up and down, see where the council goes on this. There's gotta be a proposal of what we want to do. Everyone knows what the licenses are. We've talked about this to death. It's marijuana. It's not rocket science. I'll come up with a map of the zoning, and then I'll say this license should go here, this license should go here. That simple.
So go down each of the 6 different categories.
The whole zoning map, the whole business district.
Okay, go ahead, Lauren.
I think we have a split council. I think we're 3-3. But I will say I do think this is a really important issue to hear from residents. And as much as we are representatives, I do think we need more resident input. I don't think the amount of surveying that we received is sufficient for us to understand whether this is a not in my backyard situation or not. So I understand that the law passed and we significantly voted for it here in Tenafly, but there's a social justice aspect to that law. In speaking with friends and family, they're split as well in this community. So I'm not saying I'm asking for this, but a referendum is always something we should be discussing.
No.
I know you're saying no, but that gives the voters and the residents here an option to weigh in. The other way is more surveying, figure out a way to actually reach our residents and hear back from a better surveying population. I feel very strongly that there's many residents who would be very against this and many residents who would be very excited for this. So we're not going to see a majority here. I think we have a pretty split town.
Could I have a suggestion based on what I'm hearing is Councilman Park has volunteered to put a suggested zoning map together for the council to discuss. And why don't we schedule a public hearing in January, because obviously this isn't an order of business to be voted, because we have to make changes to the ordinance to do this. We get the maps organized, Councilman Park, and then we have a public hearing in January. It's, if a change to the ordinance requires a public hearing.
I understand that, but I don't think we're getting crowds in January. I think we need more notice to the public.
So it's in February, whatever it might be, we'll figure that out. But I think that's the next 2 steps. And then you can vote on it.
If it dies there, it dies there. That's it.
Excuse me, Councilman Grossman.
Look, I'm for it. I like public discussion. I've said this many times. My only question would be, would we want, if we're holding some sort of discussion like that, do we want police chief, do we want someone from our health board, do we want some of the local experts to weigh in or not?
And that is the goal of the public hearing, for people to weigh in, including professionals. Yes, Councilwoman Davis.
One of the things we've done for Northern Valley Greenway is we actually hold these public forums. They are a couple nights in a row. People come on down. I mean, this is obviously pre-COVID, but they came in person. They met with various experts. They saw various options, like a zoning map. They learned about some information. Maybe we could bring in this presentation. And then they came out and they talked to people, and you heard directly from residents. And we had hundreds of responses in that way. I don't think that inviting them to a public hearing at a council meeting is sufficient. I think it's a sensitive topic, and I think you need to hold things in the community that people can attend to and respond.
Okay. Jeff, did you have your hand up, or are you done? I'm done. Okay, so we have some, administratively, we've got a fair amount of homework to do here to organize this. Councilman Clark has volunteered to address the zoning map issues and make suggestions. And then we will schedule, professionals, public forum, and a public hearing for the council to vote on. Okay, for the first of the year, whether it's January may be too soon, but certainly by February. And we'll work out some details, and we'll bring those details of the steps to the council at the next meeting. Okay, we're planning.
And I do need us to promulgate this to the residents.
Excuse me?
I need the borough to be promulgating this, not just on the website
No,
or
of
on
course.
the hearing notice.
Of course.
Promulgate needs to be known to the public.
Well, on Fridays, I call about 10,000 people, so.
Well, let's have a couple calls
We
before
can do
we have
that.
a survey, just for
This is the
budget.
bad one, 'cause people don't care.
Mr. DeVoe, thank you so much for
Oh,
joining.
yes, thank you.
informing us.
Thank you, Ed.
No.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the comment. And please do know that the Tenant Business Association
You could have micro licenses in
So
this
as
area,
we move
horizontal,
forward,
camera.
and our
This
still
area.
consideration,
Those
please
are
don't
orphanage
forget to
businesses.
contact me, and we
Small,
have
weird buildings.
experts, across the board, touching the
Right,
land,
all
not
those weird
touching the
buildings.
land. So,
This is
please
industrial.
consider groceries.
Edmund, on that note, our Borough Administrator, Jimmy Homsey, who's sitting here to, my left, will be in contact with you to discuss some of those issues. And thank you. Council, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted some clarification for moving forward with Mr. Hansi. Are we looking to introduce an ordinance and a public hearing, or are you looking for a public forum meeting in advance of that?
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt before Mr. Homsey answers that question. Mr. Homsey and I are going to put together our recommendations for the next steps in this process. We will run it by the council at the next meeting, which is going to include our, professional input, will include public forum, and will include public hearing and our communication process. Okay? And once the council says, which I would hope so, that they would say okay to that process, then we'll move forward and execute.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. It is public comment time. As always, we start with the members of the public that are calling in virtually. Audience members wishing to speak will have a 3-minute time limit to address the governing body. Large groups are asked to have a spokesperson represent them. Please state your name and your address when you start your comments. Omar, is there anyone out there with their hand raised?
I seen Shama Hader with her hand raised.
Shama Hader, please.
Thank you. My name is Shama Hader. My address is 156 Stone Drive, Tenafly, Germany. And I'm calling to speak on an item later down in the agenda regarding the area need of development. I have learned that some developer is interested to build a 6-story structure there, but it concerns me. 6 stories, there is no 6-story structure in Tenafly, and I don't think there's one in any surrounding to this. Firearms in 4 feet, and I thought there was a 3-story limitation in Tenafly. Besides, I think adding so many more apartments would be a real burden on our school system. I think that would be not be favorable to our schools. Again, I also want to know, I believe there was an earlier vote in which the council had voted against moving forward with this, and I'm curious why it has come back on the agenda. I believe there was a planning board committee that asked for this to be placed on the agenda. Is that normal process? That is all I would like to hear this for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shama. Next speaker, Omar. Next question.
Mr. Max Bash has his hand raised.
Good evening, Max. Go ahead. Just name and address, please.
Max Clark, 148 National Avenue, Tenafly, New Jersey. with your permission, I'd like to talk about.
Of course, go ahead.
Issue that Shama has brought out, basically the issue of area use in user development in New Jersey. I know that was voted down and somehow this was brought up again. And I'm not going to address the fact that was brought up in a way that probably was not exactly what the council was expecting. I'm going to basically talk about this process that is going to be taking place if the council approves basically the study in the area of the development. The argument for this is just a beginning process and not an ending process. I think it's completely absolutely different with that argument. We know two things. The person that pays for this development will get the results, and it happens all the time. In this case, basically, the developer will pay for that, and the consultant will come up with whatever the master says that he needs. Secondly, once that developed area in need of development is approved, like the low housing area development, now all our residential zoning requirements are going to be put aside, and we're going to be in a position that the developer now has the right, if they really want to do it, in order, because right now we're talking about this area of development, so the zoning restrictions are not, and he can basically do whatever they want. So this work becomes a very, very real problem. The fact that the zoning is not anymore in place once we start the process is not so. The second part is the taxes that are required. We know that in the tax, basically a park, and since most of the people coming in on our very good schools, we don't have a lot of people. According to my doctor, something was very fast. If we get 1.4 kids we will have about $1 million that is trust educators, and that's going to be coming out of the pocket of people like me and everybody else. The planning question is again of all kinds of issues because all these explain that planning out cannot play anything with tax, we're not allowed to get the tax problem, and that's going to be subject with no taxes and absolute development that do not care about the part of and need to now fund the taxes from our own money. Now, they also talk about the money, the payment to taxes, which means that that type of would not even go to the school system out of the board, would just go to the account and what was not the real tax to our numbers like 200,000 and 250,000. It's absolutely ridiculous. Somebody bringing up that goes so high like that. It's very hard to understand. Just one thing. $6,000 per apartment, there will be $700,000. So, to make a long story short, this is not the beginning of the process. This is the internal process. Once the council votes, it starts with that movement. Basically, I would extend in the whole area in the development. We can spread over the power to the developer, to the people that benefit from the developer, and for anybody who doesn't care over the town structure, this is the second building that we will have in the city for the other one, the hotel. The area is a single and now we're going to have a I spoke it out, and I apologize for being over maybe what people like. But I'm asking the council when they either vote them out, the problem is they are
Yeah, here, FedEx is here. Finish here.
and to vote down the development that more people's money in some people's pocket and that's thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Max. Omar, are there other speakers out there?
I have Miss Stacy with her hand raised.
Stacy? Stacy, can you hear us? Yes, your name and your address, please.
Hi.
Hello, how are you tonight?
Good. First, I just want to thank everybody, all the members of the council for volunteering your precious time to the town. It's amazing that you all did what you did, and I incredibly appreciate what you all did, so thank you. I would everything, and with all due respect to the last person who spoke and the woman before it, I was under the impression that the only vote that the council had to make tonight regarding the development in question was whether to allow the study or not, and that the council has a process and waiting for a very good reason, which is that we have to take one step before we take the next step, and if we try to jump ahead too far too fast and skip all those steps, then we're really disrupting the process in a way that I think that the council should protect that process. So that's number one. Number two is the downtown is suffering tremendously, and I know that the town has employed a separate company to add different areas, different opportunities that we should be engaging in, and for sure it's been a common denominator that adding foot traffic to the downtown will create a more modern suburban town, and we are suffering from doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And we look around us, everything else is changing, and we're not changing with it. There are reasons that developers want to invest in our town, but make our town a better place. However, we have to find a way to work with the developers so that is a win-win situation. And I think that we can probably get a lot of very successful results if we are willing to work together with developers who want to invest in our town, so that it's not just a win for the developer, but rather it's all of us. And if you had a chance to just go look at some of the other communities, like a Montvale or a Fairlawn, there are beautiful multi-family buildings surrounding a very vibrant town that has foot traffic. So, in general, I think that we as a town and we as a council have an obligation to look at all of the rules in the zoning and allow the process to happen one step in front of the other, one by one by one, because we have to change or we will continue to suffer with absolutely no downtown and no business, and that is at the detriment of all of us. So I implore the council to allow the process to happen the way that it's supposed to, and we will all be better for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Omar, next speaker.
I have Sima with her hand raised.
Go ahead, Sima, can you hear us?
Hello?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, just your name and your address, please.
My name is Steve Mendes, 188 Buckingham Road, Tenafly, New Jersey. That is the place to say the whole thing. I do agree with Stacy. I think our downtown is very similar to a ghost town, and we do need to change. It is not appealing to go down and have coffee. It is not appealing to do anything. So basically, you have to stop buying food or something. But it's not something that we have
around the rule downtown. It is a necessity, it's a basic, and I think we're losing a lot of young people, the young generation, that their perception is this is a ghost town. It's better to be out here. I think we're losing traffic, we're losing stores owners that don't have enough traffic at the end. We're gonna pay a very big price. So by having more traffic, modernized it, I don't know about this floor, familiar with the laws in it. But not necessarily for the people that will come to those apartments in the Castillo. He, 22 years old, has just been college for a year more. 60 years old, couples, not sent back for 6 acres. They don't want to leave town, but they don't move on a small apartment. There's so many options. So, good thing that by not moving down from downtown, we're keeping our income. Or whatever.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Omar.
Orly Chen has a hand raised.
Orly? Can you hear us? Good, please state your name and your address, Orly.
Orly Chen, I'm 159 Woodland Street in Tenafly. So, I'm hearing a lot of fear, and hearing citizens fear it, I'm afraid, and I'm afraid. And I think we need to ease the fear by, first of all, not being afraid of change. Stacey and I usually don't agree on a lot of stuff, but not that there's good reasons. And I think one of the reasons, Stacey and I hesitating there is we meet with people. We listen to what people are telling us. I've been living in this town for over 25 years. I have no intention of leaving. I'm investing everything that I have in this town. But I'm listening to people. People are pretty frustrated. People who think council taxes are bored. They want to see activities. They want to see things that are being removed. They want to enjoy downtown. We're not afraid of food traffic. Stop being afraid of food traffic. I've been doing real estate for 20 years. I've never put a kid in downtown Tenafly. People don't want their children to live in downtown. So what is this fear of having more children in the school system? And let's assume we're going to grow and we're going to have more children in the school system. So we're going to build a bigger school. We're going to have more taxes. Your restaurant will make more money. What is the fear of growing? What is the fear of change? What's going on? And I think a lot of it is not knowing not knowing the facts. And I think part of what we need to do in this town is to educate people so they're not afraid. Children are not going to live in downtown Tenafly. I think what makes me afraid is people don't want to move there. People are moving in Tenafly, going to cluster. Look at Richmond. Look at what's happening in Westwood. Look at what's happening in New Canaan. Why do we get citizens of this town and stop being afraid of making things better? Thank you.
Thank you, Orly. Omar?
Peter Rustin has his hand raised.
Peter? How you doing tonight? Can you hear us? Yes, just state your name, please. Yes, we can hear you. Just your name and your address, please.
Peter Rustin, 295 Woodland Street, and change is coming. You live here as long as once speakers have, you realize how Tenafly reacts to change. I don't know if people are afraid of you don't move here for another issue you're going. I moved here because we like the town that we're moving into. I'm not a realtor, but as far as I can see, the real estate market in Tenafly is a good today. People are moving in. There are various issues in schools and everything. And our kids, yes, they do. Wonderful thing. Teenager kind of done. Came back to teenage. A lot of our kids fell for us. And then when the fact that they want to raise I'd just like to point out to the elected officials something that probably and that is just about everybody that comes and speaks to you in front of you has a personal agenda.
Okay? But the I speaking about cannabis, it was much as convincing that cannabis would be a good thing. And the developers, when they give a speech about what they want to do here, they tell you how much it's going to cost. They're not moving here to prove the thing. They're moving here because they think it's a big money. And there's nothing wrong with making money if it works well for the town. But it's what to point out, and like I said, it's absolutely unnecessary. That everybody that comes here has an agenda, and that's what makes your job so difficult. You have to see through that, and then listen to the residents that don't have agendas. Listen to the residents that are here because they want to be. They move because they like the town. And that's not the way, and as Morty said, that change the town. I'll quote the next time will be to quote Gallon. A town is like a relationship. If it doesn't move forward, a town is like a shark. In comparison with a relationship, it doesn't move forward. So we do have to move forward. So let's do so in a manner that fits the residents, and if developers and store owners benefit, that's great. But, and Mark and Jeff, you constantly last 3 years, they used to sit around at the park and look at organic sand. And obviously, there's a lot of approval from the and pay, but it's not the world. It's what Tenafly is. Tenafly is not a Westwood. Tenafly is not fair. Tenafly is not a model. Probably never will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Omar?
Joe Halajian has his hand raised.
Joe, go ahead. Please state your name and your address. Could you just speak a little closer into your microphone, Joe?
Hey, Joe.
Is that any better?
Much better.
Good. Sorry about that giant face. I would like to thank corporate Mayor Russell for this conference. He pointed out something which Larry was previous to these users who seem to think that people don't want to clarify, which is materially incorrect. People are moving here, people are investing here, in their home, current homes, and buying new homes. It's very, very practices. We don't need to change to develop this new property to continue that process. That's the point. I would also say that it wouldn't be appropriate for us to be extremely correction. I'm personally proceeding against anything resembling a six-story structure. We're in the influence out of completely out of character. But it's perfectly reasonable for the town and planning board to consider using areas that could be more developed than the current law for smaller developments, for two apartments here with reasonable tax considerations. It's not over. Yet, the points that we put on the table here are a tax away of a six-story building as opposed to nothing. It seems like it's being tendency. So, when the process we're about to go forward, perhaps some limits would be within the planning that keep very considered within the character of the town as defined by the first element of the planning board on the house. So, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Omar?
I have a Yoel with the hand raised.
Go ahead. Noel or Yo?
Yoel.
Yoel, please. Could I have your name and address, please?
I never really come up with this proposal. I find myself looking into it, and as I see the council and everyone talks about it, and the fear of change is actually it's something that is a little bit wrong. We are all people that deal with business outside of town, and the town of the town is something that I would like to see a very vibrant in the evening. We have food traffic and nice places that we all can enjoy. It's exactly an advantage for us. Rather than drive half an hour to have a nice place to shop, it would be actually nice to have all these around us with, keep in mind, having more young people living in this town and having the residents here. And developing the downtown is actually an attraction rather than what I heard from some people fearing change. Change that is done with, that is calculated and being studied and being really sought through eyes of professionals is actually a good thing. I don't see any problem with that. I'm not sure that the 6-story building in this town is appropriate, but I'm sure hearing that would be really something that will attract the attention of other people that don't use the school but still contribute taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Omar?
I see no other hands, Mayor.
You see no other hands out there? Okay. Okay, so we're going to move public comment to any members of the public in the audience here. Christine, would you like to come forward to the microphone?
No, how could you? Take this off or press it on?
Why don't you, if you wouldn't mind leaving it on, because...
Christine Emerald, 39 Leroy Street, also president of the Chamber of Commerce. And I'd like to remind everyone that we're in the middle of this downtown revitalization process that is having a public forum coming up. After listening to the work session last week, I was a bit disappointed that the questions weren't more specific and useful that the downtown revitalization process came up with. I would have loved to have seen some kind of trade-off that said, we have 60 miles of road. They have to be repaved every 8 years because of climate change and new asphalt. Our taxes are going to go up from that. We can either build larger houses and have more flooding, or we can have higher density that goes higher. Perhaps there's some other solution. But I would have liked to see specific questions rather than a general question. Do you want a better downtown? Who knows what better is? It apparently was so strange that 20% or some number didn't even want a better downtown. I would like to see trade-off questions. I'd like to see in this forum, do you want things like a cannabis store downtown? I think that's the perfect venue to have this kind of question asked. This is a tremendous opportunity that you've funded. I think we should take the maximum advantage of it. I personally would love to have the question answered, do we want a modern urban downtown, or do we want a historic backdrop for our historic train station? Is that merely a matter of look, but it influences where you're going with branding? These are specific questions that I would love to see the residents poll on. We have all these people participating in the poll. We didn't get really useful input out of them. I travel a lot in Europe. There are a lot of 6-story historic buildings built at the time that this town was built that would look very appropriate here. Is that worth the trade-off of not having larger homes that cause flooding downhill? To me it is. I would be very happy with that. I would like to have a revitalized downtown that looks historic. Other people, I understand, want a modern downtown. Again, question for people, do you want to go up, do you want to go sideways? I think these are questions that could be answered and you've got the forum to do it. And as far as cannabis is concerned, the business district is very anxious to have more types of business that draw people in. If we're going to be an anchor store, we have to do it sooner rather than later, so I beg you to work quickly on this. You have to have at least the indication that you move positively on this, so that, for instance, if we want to bring a lab to town,
they have to know that Tenafly might be authorized before they can put in the application tomorrow. If we don't get in early, these people find other places, and we miss that business opportunity. Please look at this, and you do have this forum coming up. Hold it in there, give yourself a deadline. I would also ask that you consider approving this study and then ask the public. Do you want taller buildings? Do you want historic buildings? What do you want? We'll get the answers.
Thank you, Christine. Omar, who else is, Tom, come up, please. Tom, give us your name and your address, please.
Conjure that road cultural issue. I'm definitely against this. There's a bunch of homes that are putting on the faces property when you're looking at the back door and see the 6-story building. What's currently there now is a medical wall that's got to be torn down, and south of that is a little more appropriate. It's a 2-story apartment mixed use with that. I think now we're zoned for 1 or 2 family homes, and I think that would be more appropriate. And also would leave yards for absorbing the water, because that's in the flood zone there. You know, the last storm we had, Hurricane Ida, that lot was almost full up to Franklin Street. The water was unbelievable. I think also what about considering the county and eminent domain at the property? Either for parking, for commuter parking, shoppers parking, and maybe in the future greenway parking. And then also, I think I don't know how much parking is needed in the back, but that's the bank, that can be developed as other stores that will need parking. I don't know how much this parking is going to be used for a new building. Also, too, I think it's important, anytime there's any hearings on this, the neighbors should be notified. I just found out about this secondhand. None of the neighbors know this is going on. So I think it's very important. The only thing we got in the mail was from a developer who sent us a month ago. It was on about floods and that. The letters were so small you wanted to read the print on. But that the phone number wanted to call the state to ask a question, but it was out of order. It didn't work. I think it's very important in future hearings, the neighbors, I think with the 200 feet from the down in the state, here are the pros and cons. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Can I just say,
Excuse me, what?
you know, the notice, very key point.
No, that's at work. It's not. Go
No,
ahead.
there's no notice requirement for a resolution to authorize a study of the area. Any kind of notice comes in at a time when the council would be, or even if there's a site plan application to the planning board, but there's no action that is affecting the property at this stage. This stage is only a resolution to authorize a study. It is not a result of the study.
Well, I think we learned from the dog park, though.
The what?
From the dog park experience, well, we could discuss it later, but we should be very lenient with our notice.
Omar, any other out there in virtual world or publicly here? Anyone else? Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. For everyone's comments, we're going to close public comment time. Could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda? Yes, Laura. What, pardon me?
I need to pull something from the consent agenda for separate vote.
Go ahead. Which item?
R21-431, the collective bargaining agreement.
Okay, hold on. For a separate vote.
So I have a question. I have comments and questions on this. Do I need to move that to closed session?
What did you say, 4:30?
This is R21-431. Wait a minute, hold on. Which one are we on?
439, sorry. Everybody on this, handwriting. It's the collective bargaining agreement.
So that is item Q on the consent agenda.
So you want to pull that for a separate vote?
I do.
Okay.
If there is discussion necessary as to content within that, then yes, that would need to be a closed session item.
And that's where I need to move it.
So there would need to be a revision to the agenda to consider this resolution after the council comes back from closed session.
All right, so
So Mayor, there is a revision to the agenda.
there we go.
Sorry.
I thought we got away with that.
Sorry, I
Okay,
think
so there's
something substantive, and I need to sure.
So we're revising R21-439 is going to get pulled to go into closed session and potentially come back to vote on.
Well, we'll come back and vote either up or down, but the vote will be after closed session.
Okay, that's fine. And then we're having a separate vote for R21-431.
No, I made a mistake.
Oh, you made a mistake.
It's just the collective bargaining agreement I
Okay.
will pull from the consent.
Okay.
Can
Councilwoman Dr. O'Connor, you have a question?
I ask a question about letter K, which is the police vehicle? I wasn't sure if perhaps we could have Jimmy, could you just ask about this question that comes up for every time we talk about a vehicle that's purchased for the police department? Is there some sort of rule where these vehicles cannot be electric vehicles? Because, Councilman Michael and I have discussed other communities in New Jersey that have used, their police departments seem to get electric vehicles, and I noticed that this one is an all-wheel drive, and it's like 2022 or something, like it's a totally modern vehicle, and
Yeah, I don't think there's anything prohibiting the departments from pursuing that type of vehicle or purchasing that type of vehicle. It's just a matter of being, for that
So there is no rule prohibiting them from getting an electric
There
vehicle?
is no rule prohibiting it.
Yeah.
So then I guess,
It's just a matter of, for that department being specifically, funding for that and then being prepared to purchase that, all the specifications that went into this specific vehicle. I think, this was budgeted for at the beginning of the year, with their intent to purchase that vehicle. I don't think they've done enough diligence yet to be prepared to purchase, for that department, specific department, a police pursuit-rated vehicle that's electric.
so I guess I'd want to ask then, is there an appetite for us to maybe, I guess I'd ask the council that maybe we direct them to investigate an electric vehicle rather than.
So,
Go ahead,
so
Jack.
the chief ordered this earlier in the year, pretty much after we budgeted for it, so this is just delayed, basically.
Right, I figured, but.
Secondly, yes, Jimmy said, cop cars do have to be pursuit rated. I believe the new Tesla is, and
At the league, I could get you the talent, but they actually shared one of their pursuit.
and the prosecutor's office now has one, and they are going to start using it as a display model, let's call it, the showroom model for departments. And on top of that, there will be SUVs that are going to be all electric, just waiting for them to hit the state contract.
So then am I hearing then from everyone, is that this is more of a upcoming budget situation because this is the car from before? Okay.
So, okay, what?
No, I guess then there's no need to pull it if this is just the thing that we're okaying from previously,
Okay, so you're fine leaving it on the consent agenda?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you have a comment about that, Councilman? Yes, please.
I was going to say that we wanted to include in the budget for the coming year.
Yeah, the budget for the coming year. Really
2022.
Just to go sideways for a second, to follow up with Councilwoman Dr. O'Connor's comment, I think in 2022, we should be making an all-out effort for ultimately all the borough vehicles. Forget about the Public Works Department and trucks and things like that, but everything non-trucks should be electric vehicles, and we should be installing the infrastructure at Borough Hall, police station, the DPW to make that happen.
Then we
Okay.
can talk about the trucks.
Then we can talk about the trucks. Any other comments from the council on the agenda? It looks like, Councilor, we are pulling R21-439, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so, could I please get a motion on R21-423 through R21-438 and R21-440 through R21-453?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
And you read the roll, please.
Councilmember Dayton?
Yes.
Councilmember Grossman?
Yes.
Councilmember Lennon?
Yes.
Councilmember Michaels?
Yes.
Councilmember Dr. O'Connor,
Yes.
Councilmember Park.
Yes.
Okay. Hold on one second, please. Consent agenda is on. Okay, we're going to move on to public hearings. Okay. Omar, can you please read the confirmation of publication of the ordinance and the title of the ordinance, please?
Sure. Ordinance number 21-23 is an ordinance published or advertised in the Saturday, November 27th edition of the Record. It is an ordinance of the Borough of Tenafly, County of Bergen, New Jersey, approving the authorizing the amendment to the tax abatement agreement by and between the Borough of Tenafly and Tenafly Senior Citizens Housing Corporation pursuant to NJSA 40A:20-1 at seek for the property known as Lot 6 in Block 55 as shown on the official tax map of the Borough of Tenafly.
Yes. Okay, I'd like to make that comment now.
Yes, I just wanted to advise the council that there had been an updated draft of the ordinance, and it's not substantive, it's just, there was a typo as to the term of the prior tax abatement agreement. It had actually started in 1981, not 91, but it correctly states that it had been there for 40 years.
So is there any change or
There's no
edit to the new?
substantive change,
Okay,
no.
okay. Okay, I'd like to open the floor for any public comment on ordinance 21-23 from anyone out in virtual land. Omar, do you see any hands?
There's no hands there.
Anyone in the chambers here who would like to comment on this? Okay. Council President Dayton, would you like to make the motion, please?
I move to pass and adopt on second and final reading ordinance 21-23, and that notice of same shall be published according to law.
Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Omar, can you please conduct a roll call?
Councilmember Dayton,
Yes.
Councilmember Grossman,
Yes.
Councilmember Menon, Councilmember Michaels,
Yes.
Councilmember Dr. O'Connor,
Yeah.
Councilmember Park.
Yes.
Okay. Next is committee reports and then new business. I'd like to, because there's members of the, pardon me, I'm going to flip it and do new business R21-454 first because there's members of the public here and people in attendance. Okay. Go ahead. Do
Mayor.
council members have any questions or comments? Yes, please.
So Mayor, we received information on this proposal, which is a request to study an area in need of redevelopment. We received new information yesterday, a very detailed memo, and I appreciated that inclusion into this discussion. I would like to request more time to study this issue.
To read through what you received yesterday and study it more.
Yes, this is not sufficient time for me to analyze. It was a very dense memo. I'd like to see why they think the statute applies here, and so I would like to postpone this to January.
Okay, any other council members have questions about that? Or comments?
I agree.
You,
I agree with Councilwoman Dayton.
so you would like to have some more time to study the details?
Sure, I mean, I'm happy.
Jeff? Okay, so I'm kind of trying to I'm just trying to get a sense of how everyone is feeling, and then we put it on the agenda for the first meeting in January?
Second.
The second meeting in January?
First regular meeting.
First regular meeting? Okay. Any other comments from other council members on this?
Yes.
You already gave your comment, sir. You have an additional comment. Go ahead.
Because we do have the applicant and the planners here.
That was going to be my next question.
I would like to know if we can have discussion, at least if
Sure.
there's any open questions.
Are you good with that?
Time.
So, step to the mic, just please identify yourself. Council members have some questions for you.
Excuse me, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Matthew Pizzi on behalf of the developer. As Council President Dayton just mentioned, we did prepare a memorandum from our planner, Captain Gregory. Just really a brief summary of some of the redevelopment criteria that we believe the project meets. Certainly, Ms. Gregory is here this evening. We're happy to have her come up and answer any questions the council may have at this point in time, and they may have when we come back later. Just so the council's aware, this is we were trying to give the council some information, some upfront information that typically doesn't happen in the process. One of the members of the public had made reference to essentially the developer controlling the track of the redevelopment of this property should the council vote to commission the planning board to undertake the study, and that's not correct. In actuality, the municipality's professionals review and vet the project and provide opinions, advice, counsel to the planning board. So, should the process move forward, will be a deposit into the municipal escrow account from the developer to pay for your planner to prepare an independent study to assess whether the redevelopment criteria is met. And then that report will be reviewed and vetted by the planning board in conjunction with your planner, without the developer being part of that conversation. And then the planning board will determine whether it finds the substance of the report to be sufficient to make a recommendation to this council as to whether it should be declared an area in need of redevelopment. And then, if that happens, then there'll be another deposit made into an escrow account for your planner to speak to my planner about a potential scheme of development for this project site. That would be with input from the planning board and the developer, and perhaps there's a meeting of the minds. Perhaps we never reach a meeting of the minds. And if we don't reach a meeting of the minds, then the redevelopment process comes to an end, and that's that. And whatever money may be remaining in the escrow account is refunded, and everybody goes their separate ways, and that's fine. I just kind of give you a nutshell of the process, only to illustrate that what we gave you last week was just to start a discussion. There's no ultimatums here. We're not saying it's 6 stories or bust. It has to be this, or we're not interested. I know there may have been some crosstalk about that as being the message that we maybe have been projecting, and if that was the case, certainly I sincerely apologize. We were trying to give the council a flavor for, more importantly, the aesthetic of the building. Not necessarily the massing. Certainly massing is an important issue. We appreciate that. But just our idea of an aesthetic, a facade treatment that we believe will be appropriate for the downtown. Certainly, can we do a building of a shorter stature? Of course we can. Will there be school generation from the school? Yeah, the developer, myself, speaking to professionals in regard to preparation for tonight, and other applications, we believe the school generation will be limited, between 10 or 15 students. But again, you don't have to take my word for it, because part of the redevelopment process requires me to post escrow monies for your professionals to make an independent assessment as to that and give you advice. So we'll have our opinion, your professionals will have your opinion, and you'll be guided accordingly. Will a pilot agreement be appropriate for this site? Who knows? It's something that will be studied. Professionals on both sides of the aisle will be retained, and there'll be a conversation. So certainly what I think we have to take away from where we are so far is that there has been good conversation. And when I was here last Tuesday, I said really the developer has to be looked at as a cooperative with the municipality. And the fact that we've given that information, started the conversation early, are willing to entertain public dialogue on it, I hope the council appreciates that we're interested in having that dialogue to come up with something that works for both parties. We're not looking to be bullish, to push our way into a scenario that only works for us, because those scenarios don't exist in reality. It has to be something that works for both parties in order for it to be successful. That's really what we're looking to do, is create a successful development here that will achieve a myriad of things that we'll talk about in more detail. So I just wanted to so any members of the public that are online this evening would appreciate that whenever we return in January, if the council were to authorize the planning board to undertake a study, there's no form of development that's being approved as a result of that action. The underlying zoning stays in place throughout the entire process. So it's not as though the underlying zoning somehow is wiped out by virtue of that vote. There would only be a new zoning in place many conversations from now, assuming an agreement, a meeting of the minds is reached on development. So sometimes we start having a conversation and we appreciate the dialogue, and then the train starts moving ahead and we kind of miss a few steps along the way. We're going to get there. God willing, we're gonna get there, and we're gonna have those conversations, we're gonna take in the public input and have our own dialogue, but it's gotta follow in a normal course. So if I can have Ms. Gregory come up and state any questions you may have for her.
Before we go to the council, the gentleman made a couple of comments. I just want to make sure we hear from you and the council understands the process and what's going on correctly.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Yes, there was several comments from the public that may have been more fear-based and weren't quite correct. So just to clarify that, yes, this process begins with a resolution directing the planning board to do this study. That is all of the resolution that will come before you to start the process will authorize. The underlying zoning will stay in place until such time if and when the area is designated, if it's designated as an area in need, and then after that, a redevelopment plan would be brought forth, and that redevelopment plan will set the zoning for that redevelopment site. All of these steps come before the council. There is nothing that is done at the planning board level that does not have to come to the council. And in addition, the council can accept recommendations of the planning board, and the council can reject recommendations of the planning board. That is under your authority. Something I do want to point out, and I hope Mr. Pavizzi won't get too mad at me for this, but just because a developer proposes a pilot for a certain term at a certain percentage, does not mean that that's the only option that's made to the council. Tonight, you just adopted an ordinance to extend, amend a pilot, in essence, what was a tax payment agreement because it predated the pilot law, so it wasn't called a pilot, but essentially a pilot for the Tenafly senior house down the street. You know, that is an affordable housing site and it's a benefit to our community, but they're paying 15% on their pilot. So you don't have to be at 10% necessarily. It's a negotiation, and every step along the way, if the council decides to designate a site as an area in need and move forward with a designated redeveloper, because then you would designate the redeveloper and will enter into a redevelopment agreement. All those steps are negotiations and really are a dance together with a proposed developer where you need to work together in order to accomplish, as former Mayor Ruskin said, something that benefits all parties. So just keep that all in mind. Everything is subject to negotiation.
Questions from council members? Yes, Jeff, please.
My question for our council. So, as I understand, the process is we would pass a resolution asking the planning board to look into this.
Correct.
Right. If we pass a resolution not asking that, saying that we don't approve you looking into it, they can still look into it?
The planning board would be directed by the council. This is something that starts here and gets directed down.
Okay.
It's not like a zoning ordinance that can go either way.
So if we direct them that if the vote is you cannot look into it, can they look into it? That's my question.
They would need authorization from the council.
Okay, and would that include any committee of the planning board, any committee created by them?
They can always make a recommendation to the council to reconsider, but they wouldn't be able to do the study without the council.
So here's what I'm trying to wrap my head around. Asking council to reconsider would take some knowledge of it, right? Some discussion of it.
Not necessarily, because the resolution is authorizing the study in order to get the knowledge.
All right, so I guess my question then for Mr. Pizzi is, did he have any meetings with any committee of the planning board between September and December?
No.
Did your developer have any meetings?
No.
No discussions? Did you provide them with any material?
The planning board?
Any committee of the planning board? Okay, so I'm trying to understand how that committee came after we voted to have
let me
a recommendation.
address that for a second, because a couple of members, go ahead.
Hey, Mayor.
Go ahead.
If a resolution, I want to clarify something else because there's something that the public said. If a resolution is not adopted at a council meeting, Robert's Rules of Order allow the resolution to be put on the agenda again at a future meeting. So there's nothing prohibiting a resolution from being voted down at every single council meeting and still being placed back on the agenda.
Well, I think the Robert's Rules part. I'm trying to understand, since we are talking about an open process, how a committee of a board comes to make a recommendation to do something when that board never directed them to, this council never directed them to, and that committee never ever reported to the council, to the board.
So let me clarify something. So
because we had committee reports just last week.
Sure. So the site plan committee meets regularly without specific authorization on any project with the planning board, because the whole purpose of the site plan committee is to decide whether a project reaches a certain level of, somebody wants to put in 110 stories, should I bring it to the planning board? And the site plan committee gets together and says, none of us are interested in this. You want to bring it to the planning board? Bring it to the planning board. That's your business. But you're asking for an unofficial opinion? That's how the site plan committee works. It could be that someone wants to develop a site and they want to clear cut the lot, and they want to get a sense from the borough and the site plan committee about what we think about that. And so our opinion is probably going to be no if you want to clear cut the site and not have any trees on it. And then that applicant can then decide whether or not to go to the planning board, knowing that several of us probably don't like the project up front. So it's an unofficial way of discussing what's going on.
So it is discussing with the applicant.
Excuse me?
So it is a discussion with the applicant.
Sure, of course.
But I just had the applicant say they had no discussion.
Oh, it's not always a discussion. In this particular case, we all had copies of what it looked like. So the site plan committee got together. I think we actually did by Zoom. I don't remember. And we said, what do we think? Do we want to make a recommendation to the council to look at this again? And the planning board can't make that decision because the council didn't authorize them to discuss it. So the planning board, the full planning board can't do it.
Right, the committee never even reported, our committee reports, the committee never even reported to the planning board.
I mean, the site plan committee reporting to the planning board?
As a committee report.
So
we do committee reports, I do committee reports on there.
So everything that comes before, everything that comes before the site plan committee doesn't, because sometimes there's nothing to report. So it's not, and I don't know the timing of which meeting took place when, okay, off the top of my head, but everything the site plan committee does doesn't get reported to the planning board, the full planning board.
But if they're going to make a recommendation to this council, shouldn't that be reported? I mean, that's not no action. Sure, but it's a recommendation, to make a recommendation for a consideration. It's just all going around in a circle. The council wanted some sort of recommendation to say, okay, maybe consider looking at this. So that's what we did. All right, so, look, what I hear, by the way,
yes,
I do know a couple of people talk about fear, and I've lived in this town my whole life, and I've watched a lot of changes, and I embrace change. I embrace control change. So this notion of fear is almost insulting, because I do not live and make my decisions out of fear. And so for those who are insinuating that this council is fearful, I think they need to really weigh how they're looking at us. But that being said, the other thing that I get is, we talk about this being an open process. So when there are decisions, even to make a recommendation, in closed rooms not open to the public, I think what that does is it diminishes from time to time the faith that the public has in our ability to make open and fair decision-making. Because they hear that, okay, this was voted on, then there was a decision made, and I'm not questioning the committee's right to make that decision so much as no reporting to the planning board, no direction, no nothing, and then we met in closed room and here is our recommendation.
But it was reported to the council in a public meeting.
A meeting that here's our recommendation, not that we're going to be looking at this, nothing else. So I just want the public to be aware that going forward, this would, if it is a recommendation, be an open process. That this committee, no committee will be meeting in the back room. No committee will be having private negotiations. That all negotiations would be in the public eye.
Except, Jeff, there were no negotiations. It was, do you guys like this project? Should we ask the council to think about it?
So
This
now
is a
I'm saying,
conversation.
going forward, that's what I'm saying, going forward, any negotiation that would result would have to be in the public eye and not between individuals privately.
Sure, but there were no previous negotiations. I don't want, don't imply that there were negotiations with the developer on this project, because there were not. This was a conversation to say, what do the four of us think about this? Should we send it to the council and say, why don't you guys look at it? We're in a whole list of circular reasoning here about whether we should have a conversation about having a conversation. That's what's going on. Councilwoman.
So one of the things I was actually going to bring up tonight in this new business, and actually, Jeff, your comments lead me right to it, is that I believe that our council should consider making a council committee that is called the Redevelopment or Revitalization Committee, that when there is an area in need of redevelopment, members of this body can help represent what this body needs to the planning board. There is a lack of communication both ways here, from the planning board to us and from us, what our needs and wants and questions are back to the board. And what I'm trying to do is come up with a committee that would facilitate that. So as part of the new business, now a council can make any committee. We can make this committee and decide amongst the six of us who's on it. My recommendation would be the person who is on Board of Adjustments, the person who is on the planning board be part of these committees. I think that it's important that when we have questions, such as an environmental issue on a property, or, we discussed the pilot that we just passed for the senior housing, we had questions. There's not a mechanism for us to bring those questions back to these boards. And these boards should hear where our thought process is and our concerns. So I would like to ask my council if they are interested in such a committee and if we want to install it.
So would this operate after sending a recommendation to the planning board? Because you can't ask the planning board to do something unless the full council votes on it.
Correct.
Right? So how would that?
This would be a committee that if something like this comes to us, a request to study or investigate, or an approval that there will be a study and investigation, the council still has the ear of the residents. They still have their own representative opinions here as to, how our town should be developed as we go forward. Any issues environmental, any issues in density, commercial, whatever it is we need to do. And like Jeff said, we're not acting out of fear. We're acting out of caution to make sure that any development in our town makes sense for the larger community. And I just want to finish because I think that maintaining the character of the town is something I'm interested in. Maybe it's not something necessarily the planning board's interested in. And they should hear that that the council person sitting here and speaking with residents, such like a Joe Halagian, are interested in the character of the town. And maybe that gets lost in the communication process.
So you want the council to study it before it sends it to the planning board to be studied?
Yeah.
Right now, the six of us, except for sitting at this table, has not had an opportunity to even consider what kind of redevelopment, not just this project, but in the other projects before us.
So that's a question for Wendy.
The way I'm hearing it, Mayor, it sounds more of a committee of the council to participate in the redevelopment plan process, not the study. Obviously, the study is done by a planner, and you'd have to have a designation.
Well, yes, that's perfectly fine. So how would
wouldn't the whole council do that?
So I'm trying to understand how it would work in terms of like an application like this. What would the process be?
So the process would be, first there'd have to be a study authorized, and then if the study were to come back and indicate that the site has the criteria.
So we're not asking.
My request is, we know there's an applicant coming before the council who is asking this exact question. We have two of them right now, for example, before us. One on Dean, one here on Clinton and
Dean's
Brentwood.
already been,
But I'm saying the process. They come before the council, and they ask us, would you give permission for the planning board to undergo these intensive studies and investigations? The conversation between the six of us, or between a subcommittee looking in, saying, does this make sense, for the culture? We hear from our residents, does this make sense to our residents? What issues do we want to raise? What questions do we want to see studied? Well, we task the planning board to go study. I'm not able to say, compare the density of this with 5 years density.
that's not part of a study of an area need. That's part of the development of the redevelopment plan, once a site is designated.
And I understand that, but at some point,
No, I don't know which one.
the issues that we have at this council table are not conveyed to anything that's happening in the planning.
So how would the details be gathered that would be sufficient for you to study it before it's done?
Well,
I mean,
I know it's chicken and egg, but
well, it's not really a chicken and the egg. The whole process, and correct me if I'm wrong, council, is if the council decides forget about this particular application. If the council decides to have something studied, they delegate it to the planning board to do that. Then the planning board comes back to the council with the study. It sounds like you're asking for the study to be done before
I don't want an official study. That's not what I'm asking for. What I'm asking for is a discussion amongst the six council people as to what direction our community should look like. I'm asking for a committee here to be able to weigh in amongst us and say, does this make sense? Would we recommend it for the six of us to even move to investigate? Just like we have on cannabis, just like we do a deep dive on the cannabis and then come back and report. That I want to see that done on our council before I go and tell the planning board. Because once that train leaves the station, let's be honest, once the studies have been done and things are moving, it is very, very hard to say, we're not interested at all, and that's a problem. I think that there needs to be a discussion at this level about whether, I'm not explaining it, about whether we believe that that this request even makes sense in the larger picture of our community.
It sounds to me like, Councilwoman Dayton, are you saying perhaps that the committee you'd like to form would be necessary when the request comes? So
Yes.
as needed?
Yeah, as needed, if a request is made to investigate, we as the council decide, does it make sense to investigate? And I think some members of us should really look into that and say, what overall, we should be looking at here. Not just, topography, environment, not the generic traffic study, but does it make sense in terms of what we know from our residents?
But isn't that what we're doing here?
Right now,
I'm confused.
Hold on. Can I ask-
Go
We are
ahead,
not
please.
part of the planning board study. We don't get to raise our issues. Go ahead.
So, if somehow a resolution was put on, the meeting in October, asking for this to be considered an area in need of redevelopment, who made that request?
I did.
No, but how did you make the request? Did you do it on your own, just kind of say, hey, this looks like a great area,
The mayor sets the agenda.
Or, I got elected mayor, and so I put something on the agenda.
No. What I'm asking is, does an applicant, somebody who's buying a property say, hey, we're looking into, we're doing something.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, so where does that,
So the whole process originates with the applicant.
Right.
The applicant says, I have X project,
So I think.
would you consider it?
So I think what Councilman Dayton is saying is, when they say, we have a project, would you consider it? That, this subcommittee would be brought in at that point.
So Mayor, if I'm hearing this
But a project
correctly, it
doesn't
sounds
exist.
like the council wants representation on the site plan committee beyond yourself. They want a council member on the site plan.
I don't want to be officially on the site plan committee under the planning board. I want our
We're not
own.
going to the planning board.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
That's
I
not what
want
I'm
our own council committee.
So
I want our own council committee, like we had our own cannabis committee, understand the nuances of what the applicant wants, to even decide whether it makes sense or it's reasonable to put it to a full study for 6 months or a year.
So, to compare to the Cannabis Committee,
Yeah.
they do nothing with that because all they do is worry about zoning, make sure,
They did law, we had a legal analysis, we had memos,
No,
they
we-
did public survey.
but we can say no to it whenever we want. It's,
So we could say no to this investigation, we could say yes to this.
right now, we could say that.
However, the process getting to this point is bumpy.
So
The
what-
process
Hold on, time out.
getting to this point-
There's nothing at the process right now. There's no project. They don't know, this could be one story because of all the whatever, the water, flooding, blah, blah, blah. Nobody knows because nothing's been studied. Because no one's approved them to move forward.
Not every applicant here who comes before us seeking an area in need of redevelopment or an area in need of revitalization or a pilot has the opportunity to speak to the 6 of us. They have the opportunity to speak to the planning board. They have no opportunity to hear from us and to have an exchange. We offered this, and at last meeting I offered the opportunity for questions and answers. Today we have the opportunity to talk with Gregory Associates if we so choose. But the point to get here was not a smooth process.
So I have a question for you. So if you have this committee of council people, this committee,
Yep.
are those council members going to decide what gets to go to the
No, they
council
will bring
table
it
and
to
vote?
us,
So,
to the full council. So just like the cannabis committee has to bring it to the full council to vote, the subcommittee, the redevelopment or revitalization.
so every matter would come to the full, every single matter?
It has to. for a
Okay,
full
I'm just
vote.
asking.
It has to, but what that would bring us is information, process, the ability to speak to the developer, the ability to speak to the attorney, the ability to speak to, a consultant, and say, is this reasonable? Is the ask even reasonable here? Because right now, we cannot decide this in a vacuum, which was the problem for the first time we put this applicant on. No information, you saw the vote. Everyone said, nothing to vote on here. But if there's a process, if there's a subcommittee whose job it is to do a deep dive on the information, and I'm not saying it has to be the study, like we're going to study the topography and I need a traffic study. Obviously, that's the planning board's, process. What our process is would this be something that would make sense for our residents, for the overall community? These are different aspects of what the planning board is going to study. They're going to study, is there a flood zone? Is there a setback? Is there a height variance required? That's what they're looking at much more so than a smart growth plan and an overall master plan that we, the 6 of us, not a master plan, sorry, wrong word, an overall community development concept, I'll make up a word, that the 6 of us should be understanding. It's very hard to do these projects one off, without a sense of what else is happening in town. You happen to be on the planning board, Mr. Mayor, so you understand from 2 different directions, but you have a lot of information the 6 of us here who have to make this decision don't have.
Right, I agree.
And that's
What
really cool in the
decision?
process.
But that's how it's set up by statute.
Perhaps if I can make a
I
recommendation.
didn't hear what Mr. Cleese said.
I'm
The
sorry.
statute tasks the council with this decision first.
No,
And if-
there really is, this is relevant, in 99% of all instances, this is perfunctory.
Correct.
The commissioning of the council, of the planning board to undertake the study at the developer's cost is perfunctory.
It's not perfunctory, excuse me. I read the statute backwards and forwards. I read the case law.
Council President, let me just finish. Commissioning the planning board to start the study is perfunctory. The outcome of this study is unknown. That's the thing. I don't understand the rest, like on 343 Tenafly Road, the council, without issue, declared it an area in need, and then the steps followed.
It wasn't without issue. It was with discussion. And the discussion happened.
I can tell you, I didn't appear at all during any hearings on that, and that's fine in every instance.
That was you and your applicant's choice.
There is no ask. When you say, is this ask even feasible, there's no ask.
There's no project.
Wait, I want to respond.
The ask is.
One at a time.
If I can just get clarification from my counsel here, think what the issue is that the council would like to be educated before being asked to make the decision.
Correct. That's exactly a very nice succinct way.
And you want to do that at a committee level?
I do.
Would it make sense perhaps to make the request of the clerk and the administrator and the mayor that anytime any such ask is going to be made, that in a prior meeting, a presentation be made by a developer, a planner?
Not sufficient. We need a discussion. I would like a discussion among some members of us to then bring it to the larger group with education, not only just from an applicant, which obviously has a particular bias towards, advocating for that project, but with a neutral eye to, would this be right for our community? The statute gives this investigative decision to the council for a reason.
No investigation done by the council.
They give the decision whether to task the planning board to study for a reason. Because sometimes the council sees issues in the community that the planning board may not. Sometimes.
Respectfully, it's because it's an expenditure of money. That's the only reason why.
Well, that's your take.
If your borough professional did not need to be hired through the applicant's deposit of escrow money, there would be no reason to come before the council. That's the primary reason why the council is tasked with commissioning the planning board, because the planning board doesn't hire professionals and spend money in the manner that the council does. Is that correct, Ms. Burke?
That's correct.
Except yet, as I sit here today, this council can say yay or nay to that decision. And so I need that decision to be based on facts. I need that decision to say and investigate.
Jesus Christ.
What facts are you referring to, though?
Nothing exists. This is, do we want a parking lot, or do we want this guy to pay to make it look like not a parking lot? Not a parking lot is the bare where we are. We have a parking lot. Do we not want a parking lot? And that is what.
Never discussed if we want a parking lot or not a parking lot. That's a discussion.
That's where we are.
So that's a separate conversation entirely. In other words, but wait, let's back up for a second. So an applicant is asking, can we get this thing studied by the planning board or not? And the council, not tonight, in January, will make a decision after they've studied things more that they have, okay?
Now we have information.
Right, okay, so you have additional information, and the council will make a decision about authorizing the planning board to study it or to not study it, okay? The council's not making a decision about whether there should be a parking lot there or a building. That's an entirely separate master plan conversation, right? That's a whole separate issue. And if the council wants to meet in committees to discuss those issues, that's great. That's fine. But we can't conflate the two topics. And if the council wants to have a committee to talk about these details and do some extra homework, because the applicant, it's not a process the applicant's going to expend funds on.
And nor am I asking for the applicant.
Right, okay, all right. So you're basically asking for the council to be able to have a three-person, whatever three can't be more than three-person conversation.
I am. To decide whether to send it to the
And
planning board.
and it has to be more than one meeting before.
Sure, you could, we're just trying to get clarity.
As long as there's no quorum.
I'm trying
Right.
to see how this would work. And maybe we try it for a project or two and see how it works, so we can amend our own committees.
Vanu, and then Julie,
Oh,
please.
no, it's okay, I was just playing.
I think the forming committee or subcommittee is the easy part. I think the part that we would need assistance on is getting knowledge of the applicant. Because sometimes we don't know who the applicant, we honestly didn't know who the applicant was formally until it came up in the resolution.
But maybe not so much, I'm less concerned about the applicant and their future project as I am about the existing land that needs to get analyzed. For me, the decision before us now is the underlying property. Is this in an area in need of redevelopment? As it exists today, what exists on this property, these 4 lots? For me, I need information on that. I went ahead today and I walked the parking lot. Does that mean I understand where the river, where the brook flows? No, I'm going to need information on that underlying property. I don't necessarily think it has to include anything to do with the applicant. it would be nice to know what they're interested in
No,
creating.
I didn't mean, I meant when an applicant is coming forth with a
Right,
request.
okay.
That's what I mean, not, because until we're not looking at the property, Wells Fargo parking lot, without, if it's in the hands of Wells Fargo.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm all for having a committee.
And
I'm not arguing
I'm
against it.
exploring this as I discuss it.
Okay, so I'm just asking, how are you going to get that level of detail?
So if this is something, look, if this is something that we think is not an area that's light in disrepair, all of these things under the statute, we don't think it's a reasonable thing to push that this will fall under the statute, then I think I think that this subcommittee should make a recommendation, just like your subcommittee on the planning board made a recommendation.
Well, I'd like to just clarify that. You're not going to be deciding necessarily ahead of time, because you're not planning experts whether or not
Correct.
this falls under.
Correct.
I think what you're
That would
going
be
to
the
say,
step.
Council President, is that you'd like the committee to look at a proposed lot and decide whether you seek change on that lot or not.
Thank you, Wendy, that's well said, I'm going with what Wendy said, that's what I want. There we go.
So that's more of an overall.
And that's,
Master
looking-
plan.
Thank you.
Overall.
Okay, it's-
But it's, and, you know, if you have your council committee that is a, your council, master plan committee,
we won't give it that word.
you have
A redevelopment revitalization.
to make recommendations to the planning board.
No, just-
No, I understand. But as a council, you can always direct the planning board to look at something for an amendment to a master plan. So look at something proactively if you think it's blighted, if you'd like to see an area of study.
We could actually independently, in this committee, find a piece of land that we want to say investing, that or doesn't have to be an applicant, and that's.
Sure,
the advantage
there's
of this
no
committee.
question about that, of course.
And this committee can actually go and undertake that, whereas right now, the six of us, nobody's actually actively looking or considering.
That's fine.
Does that make sense?
I like Councilwoman Dayton's,
One at a time here so we can hear.
so I like the Council President's suggestion. I just would want some clarification as to help the success of this committee as needed when we have applicants, just so that we do have a little more clarification on how much time the committee would get, so that it isn't just like a one cycle of, you got 2 weeks to try to meet with, like, that might be something that needs to be clarified. And so now that I've said that, I do have a question for Mr. Capizzi, or actually about this particular issue, if you don't mind.
You have the floor, go ahead.
So I guess, and this might be something that Wendy might want to hear. So the thing is, so Mr. Capizzi, so the way I understand it, I guess I just want some clarification for me, is you have two ways you can approach this, right? So you're pursuing this with the possible zone of in need of improvement or redevelopment, and then, or you could have gone, I guess, that traditional route, which was just to go to the planning board, right? So can I kind of ask you, what are the reasons to go this direction versus the other one? Because I know that question came up last time, and I wanted to hear it from you, and then I maybe might want to hear from our own attorney as well about some things.
So depending on the nature of the application, you actually have a third option, that would be to go before the
No.
and seek an alternate form of variance relief. And we thought that based upon the various concepts that we were proposing, that a redevelopment rather than instead of, and in addition, the request for a pilot agreement, which would not come by way of a planning board site plan application. The pilot agreement only comes by way of a redevelopment designation.
Mm-hmm.
And so without that designation, at the very least, we wouldn't be able to arrange a pilot, which is a critical component of the project. Given the capital investment we're making in the property, by way of the construction of the building and the type of building we're looking to create, essentially a unit that would be commensurate with some of the homes on the East Hill as far as quality and finish is concerned, as well as some of the off-track improvements we're going to make, namely the culvert replacement, as well as the need to bring on certain affordable housing units. Those are all costs to the project, and at some point something has to give by way of some relaxation on the taxes for our real estate taxes. So that's why we elected to go for the council to seek the redevelopment designation to its redevelopment plan. And honestly, in most municipalities, a redevelopment plan is a welcome addition. The reason why that is, if I bring that application to the planning board, I have my concept, I have my architectural drawings, I present that to the planning board, and it's an up-down vote. There's not a lot of dialogue between the members of the planning board and the applicant as to, well, what do you think about this finish, or maybe making this room a little higher, or using this kind of material on the windows, or this kind of setback. There's not a conversation that you have in a redevelopment route. So a redevelopment route really is more of a cooperative between the municipality and the developer, whereas the planning board route is applicant appearing before the board and asking the board to make a yes or no vote on that application. So given the location of the property, what we're seeking to do there, we felt that the redevelopment route was the most appropriate.
Thank you.
But candidly, I mean, we're going to get, we're really, we're getting bogged down here, right? So we've dedicated 4 months to this, and if we get to where we need to be in January, it's worthwhile. Candidly, when we're talking about the formation of committees, it doesn't sound like there's really an interest in getting this project online and redeveloping this site and doing something exciting here, and that's okay. So we just have to think of different options about how we want to approach potential redevelopment of the site. As I made known to the council when I was here last Tuesday, we're contract purchasers. If this property was online, we had good rents generated from it, and we owned it, totally different set of circumstances. We could sit back and take a more relaxed approach and burn the clock, because it really doesn't cost us that much. It may cost us some money, but not as much. Under the current scheme in which we are trying to acquire the piece and what we're looking to do with it.
Oh, okay.
You know, we just don't have the time to kind of recreate or shift the process.
So this is factoring, this factors into your decisions as to whether you purchase it or not. I understand. Okay.
And we started spending time and money, certainly on my developers paying needs, Ms. Gregory. We have an architecture concept put together. We have engineering plans we're preparing. We're assessing the environmental impacts on the property, namely how the stream impacts the piece. So we're moving in further into the of a redevelopment scheme here. We just want to know which path to go. And, you know, I appreciate everyone's candor here this evening, and so now a bit of my own candor. It doesn't seem like we're going in a route that, you know, if we're going to do this, we got to do this. This is, you know, the old adage, time is money.
Right.
Brings through in almost every scenario. Certainly, if there's a committee that wants to meet, you want to have that meeting on Monday, let's have a meeting. If you want to meet with Mr. Cohen and his architect and his engineer and have that meeting, let's have the meeting. If the council wants to have a special meeting and tell everyone tonight, hey, come to the council chambers at 12 o'clock Monday afternoon, we'll have that meeting. So I'm not trying to avoid the dialogue, just that we couldn't, to say, Matt, come see me January 25th, doesn't really cut the mustard.
Okay.
Lauren, you have a question, please?
I do. You know, I know you don't want to get in the weeds, but that's where we're looking at, some of these weeds. So we're talking 75 units proposed, 11 co-ops, so let's say 64, in which you're going to rent out for an average of $300,000 to $500,000. You're talking East Hill amenities, which is somewhere between $20 and $32 million for this structure.
For the cost of construction, Council President?
So do you have a sense of how much that would cost?
No, I
Okay? So,
I think your estimates are, I'm sorry, just based upon initial conversations with Mr. Cohen and other projects I've done, I think probably the $20 million is a fair estimate as far as capital improvement.
so let's say at $500,000 an apartment, that's 12 million profit, or give or take. Or if it depends on if it's purchased or rented, correct?
Well, no, just based on the proposed affordable housing set aside, it will be a rental project.
Okay, so where I'm going is that you said, time's money, I get that. There's a significant amount of money to be earned off this project. There is also culvert repair that is pennies on that project. You know, we just investigated all of our culverts and.
Well, it's pennies, the municipality would done, right?
Well.
It can't be small money.
We have just spent $500,000 on culverts. I didn't know if you knew that.
But this section was this section touched?
This section was touched, it was investigated.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's planned to, the replacement isn't necessary.
We don't know, you know, and I'm not going to discuss that detail, but I'm just saying, you
But
know.
listen, you're gonna pay for it, great.
My question is, tell me the benefit to our existing residents. Tell me the benefit to our existing commercial retailers during the day. Tell me the benefit to the existing commercial retailers during the evening. You're not putting commercial here, so we're not getting new stores for our residents.
No, you wouldn't want to do that.
Tell me the benefit to the traffic patterns. I'm trying to balance here. For a resident who lives here today, tell me what this building does.
So, certainly, if you can entertain me for a few minutes, I'll go through that. First, as far as traffic is concerned, we're providing 2 parking spaces per unit.
You realize it's the densest, one of the densest intersections in town.
You know, the trip generation, at 70 units, the trip generation will be nominal at that intersection.
There's 140 possible cars, 2 adults per unit.
Right, and as you're aware, not all vehicles leave the driveway at the same time, especially the proximity of the site to mass transit. The goal is that a certain percentage of the occupants will be utilizing mass transit. But we'll have testimony from a traffic engineer to talk about these issues with the planning. But overall, I think, what's the benefit? I can't even believe I have to say it, candidly. But to me, the obvious is having 70 or so units online in proximity to your downtown, where we're trying to talk about having pedestrian-friendly access from a unit to the downtown, because as we talked about last Tuesday with your other planning consultant, there's concerns about available on-street parking. What's more ideal than somebody that can come out of the door and go right to the downtown within a 2-minute walk? Why would I want to have more retail on West Clinton when the retail on Washington Street, West Railroad is suffering? I want to put a new retail business on West Clinton and draw traffic away from Washington Street? No, I want people from West Clinton to leave the front door and walk 2 blocks down and go frequent an establishment that's already there. What's the benefit to the municipality? $150,000 at least in additional tax dollars with limited school generation.
And you've asked for a pilot?
Correct.
Payment in lieu of taxes?
Well, that is a pilot arrangement. It's $200,000 in taxes, 95% of which is kept with the.
Do you know how many years you're going to be asking for?
It's a negotiation. No, I don't. Again, we have a professional that would assess what's an appropriate percentage of the gross revenues, what's an appropriate timetable based upon the financial constraints of the project. He would prepare a memorandum and submit it to your professional that would be paid for at our cost. And then there would be a dialogue about whether those 2 professionals would have a meeting of the minds as to what's an appropriate pilot arrangement. And then again, it goes to the council to say, okay, Mr. Smith works on behalf of the borough. He recommends a pilot arrangement of X and Y. Does the council agree with this professional? Yes or no? But as a general matter, there's no. Although impervious coverage is coming down as a result of this project, because we're taking improvements away from the stream bed, there isn't much open space here for recreational purposes for children. So this isn't the kind of complex that somebody had said, I think, a member of the public has spoken, 1.4 children per unit. That's grossly an overestimation.
Probably 2.4.
I'm sorry?
It's probably more.
No, I mean, but
Well, I don't want to discuss these, but my question is, I'm a resident here, I live here.
But again, we have to speak, like, why would you say it's more though? I mean, I, for better or for worse, I've been doing this religiously 18 years. These units generate, at 80 units, you're lucky you have 10 school kids. Now, that's not me, that's census data, but again, it'll be verified. When we talk about, all I'm saying is, let's not make a determination about the life or death of this project based upon information that's yet to be received.
As a resident here in Tenafly, I live here, obviously. I will not be in this apartment. Tell me how it benefits me. How do I, as a homeowner with small children and, fighting traffic and fighting, site, density, tell me how this project should be moved forward.
Do you care about the downtown?
I care about the character and nature of our downtown, of course, or I wouldn't be sitting in this seat if I
Right,
did.
so you care about the vitality of the downtown?
I do.
This project will support the downtown.
I haven't heard how.
People. Have you ever owned a restaurant? The number one thing you need is people.
There are 15,000 residents right now, and if they choose to use our small businesses, they can. I don't need to add another 200 to keep the vitality of the town going. These 200 can go to Coaster Plaza just as much as I can and you can and everyone else can.
Don't let the downtown businesses
You are not
that.
guaranteeing the vitality of our town by increasing the density of our downtown. All you're doing is adding bodies. We have 5,000 households currently who have the ability to use our downtown.
You asked the question about benefit as a former restaurant owner. I'm just saying a very simple thing. As a restaurant owner, any restaurant owner, right, is people walking in front of your store on a regular basis generally helps your business. That's all. It's that simple. There's no greater...
Council President, it's like anything else, really. If it's convenient, people will go.
Right.
Right, so if you're within a minute and a half to 2 minutes of the downtown area, that's what creates an active downtown, is having people proximate that are going to go home from work at 6 o'clock.
All right.
Utilize the gym inside the building, and then go have dinner someplace right outside.
So we've been at this for quite a while now. So I've heard couple of key things here, is that the council wants time to review the information that they received last night, okay, and move for a vote on this at the first meeting in January, was it? Okay, first meeting in January. And the council is going to put a committee together of 3 council people that will have questions for the applicant.
Is the council on board with this?
Council on board with that? I need some.
With that subcommittee?
On board with
Putting a committee of 3 of you together?
Are we doing that, Mr. Mayor, on this project, or?
I thought that was a general.
Independent has nothing to do with this
Independent committee of
particular
the council.
project.
I'm just trying to get clarification on topics, okay? And if they choose to meet before this,
Yeah.
have some questions for you before the January meeting, in between, I think that's.
And
Okay.
I just really super quick about subcommittee work. I just have to defend the work of the cannabis subcommittee, as in like myself personally. I need to just say it was hours and hours of, quite a lot of research around the topic. And I keep hearing people kind of like discount, what the subcommittee was able to learn and gather and accomplish. And so, yes, subcommittees are very important, and they take a lot of time. I hope that our cannabis committee was informative to the council writ large, which I think is what Councilwoman Dayton's been proposing for this. So I'm very supportive of that. It's just that, a lot of people seem to think it was
Okay,
nothing.
so which of the council members want to be on the committee?
So since I'm asked to have it created, I would like to be on.
Okay, any other council members?
These are
Manu is
Councilman
the only-
Grossman, Councilman.
Jeff is planning unless someone feels otherwise. The whole point is to create a line of communication to those boards, so.
So my only ask is, I think it's great if the subcommittee wants to put some extra work into it. It just can't slow down the process. I think, this process here, however it happened, I don't think it makes us look very good at all, and I don't want to create another layer of committees that want to meet for 6 weeks before the next committee, before the next. So I'm okay with the subcommittee as long as it works in between, the meetings, and we don't delay these sessions for it. We have to become more agile. This is a great example of why businesses don't come to our town, because we have these sessions.
Okay, so we're good with this, ready to move on to the next topic, ma'am? Okay. Matt, thank you very much for being here. The committee will be in touch with you. Okay?
Perfect. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. So now we're going to go to committee reports. We'll start with Councilwoman Dr. O'Connor on my left.
Yes, hi. Okay, so the Green Team, this is for Environmental Commission and Green Team. Green Team is going to be devising a protocol for donations. They want to make sure that people get, credit for donations. They intend on making a donor outreach system, and they are going to work on a form. And this is because, sometimes they'll have people want to say they want to donate a bench in memory of someone or whatever, and they want to make that a little bit easier, and that those people who are donors get that, credit that they deserve. For Environmental Commission, the high school composting project is starting in January, so that's rather exciting. We do have a high school kind of representative on the Environmental Commission, so that's good. And she was saying they might want to arrange a trash cleanup by the high school, and if that happens, as the weather gets a little warmer, then Councilman Park had volunteered to assist with getting those materials they need for a trash cleanup, the tongs and things like that. According to the DPW, we are making money on both the cardboard and the commingled recycling, so that's really good as a town. People should know that. And last but not least, in the Environmental Commission, with the discussion that was ensuing, and I referred to this last week, there was concern about flooding. There was discussion on the fact that our town should strengthen our own land use regulations because of the change in climate. And there was a feeling that previous regulations were probably written, and this could even mean from the state, as was being discussed, that they were written at a different time with a different reality. And now, with things being wetter and warmer, that we should be looking to strengthen those regulations.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Michaels.
Super quick, just a big thank you to DPW Director Cassidy for the council. The DPW took away the outdoor dining for the winter. Now it's getting cold. Spoke to all the businesses and hope we could bring that back again. We'll bring that to the council in the February-March timeframe. Second, big thank you to the Downtown Committee, the Rec Department. We kicked off our Winter Wonderland, the ice rink, last week. Had it sold out. Literally all the slots were sold out. Big thank you to Miller's Bakery, Mel's Butcher Box. Big thank you to actually a lot of the high school track team was there, raising money. The project graduation was there, giving out s'mores. So I really thought it was a great example of businesses, students, and residents coming together. And then just the third thing is for the rec department, we have Santa coming on Wednesday. We have over 250 people signed up. Santa will be at the ice rink. People will be able to have some free skates, so hopefully the mayor could talk about that well, he spoke about it at last Friday's event. So, yeah, overall, really, really good.
Okay, thank you. What time is Santa showing up, by the way?
Santa's showing up, I think, at 4:30. Hold on one second. Santa is showing up at 4:30. 4:30 to 6:15, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Matt.
Where is that going to be?
At the ice rink, yeah, which is on the back.
So,
go ahead, Councilman.
Just a quick shout out to the Chamber of Commerce, which had its, speaking of Santa, there was a holiday parade
last week, and it just, it's done very well, and okay, just wanted to mention that. And then on the, from the zoning board of adjustments, there was one application that was heard several months ago that just kept getting, rolled over to following meetings, and because there weren't enough board members available to vote on it. And ultimately this time there was enough, and the board voted and approved it. It was to install a pool and a pool house and other related structures. So that was approved. There was another application that was heard for replacing a screened porch with new and large 3-season rooms and a paver patio. That was delayed to the next meeting. And so that was it on the senior center. The board met, and they had there was a discussion about the Hunterdon theater trip. Well, that took place this past week, on Friday, this past weekend. And it sold out, and it was very well done, and Michelle was very happy with how it all went. There was a discussion of the bylaws, and there are other activities coming up in the new year. There's Back to Broadway on April 6th with Tina Turner. And there was a trip to the American Dream Mall. A bunch of people went, got to whatever, took the senior bus and went to the Inverted. The only thing to add about the senior center is they had issues with their communications, telephones, and internet and stuff that took over the past 2 weeks. In discussions with the borough administrator, I was told that that's been resolved, at least temporarily. That it will be looked into further in the new year. But for now, they're at least up and running. They were truly, having trouble for the past 2 weeks with that.
Okay, so I'm just going to make a comment I was going to make at the end, but since Manu was just talking about the power, one of the things we were talking about that we want to bring to the council to be considered in January in terms of the internet access at the senior center is extremely poor, and we'd like to finish the connection from the high school through us, and it costs about $18,000. And we've kind of done some homework, and we can use money if the council chooses that we've already received from the American Rescue Plan money, okay, that we have. But we'll put that to be considered in January for discussion. Yes.
Can we do a community block grant?
Can we what?
Can we do that as a community block grant?
No, we're not a census tract town.
Got it. Just because we gave up the bathroom.
Yeah. Well. Okay. Council President, why don't you go ahead with your report?
Sure.
That's on.
Our welcoming committee would like to hold a new residence event at the ice rink, so we're trying to coordinate. I've been working with Councilman Michaels on that. So that would be for new residents. We will try to find a date and a time, and residents can sign up and hopefully meet some new residents and families here. Our pride committee met, but unfortunately I missed it. But it looks like they're looking for some advocacy, and of course they're still trying to get rainbow benches at Hyler and all 6 schools. And those are buddy benches for anyone who just needs someone to talk to. The Northern Valley Greenway is actually meeting this week, and the Nature Center is meeting this week as well. The Nature Center has opened up its afternoon education programs for kids. So if anyone wants to sign up for any of those programs, please go to their website. And thank you to Deborah and the whole board this year for all of their hard work. They've been doing a wonderful job. Tomorrow we will discuss the ropes course with the board, and I'll report back. The Senior Services Committee met with Omar and myself, members of it, to develop the website so that we have more resources for our families and our community members that need those services. So we are building a very intricate website with lots of details. And our DPW meeting got postponed to next week. That's everything.
Okay. Jeff?
All right. Council President Dayton just shortened mine by one by saying about the DPW committee. All right, number one on the hit parade. The Historic Preservation Commission met. I did not have the opportunity to attend that, but I can report to you that they are discussing print costs for the walking tour. And they also did, I want to make sure everyone knows, receive an extension on the Roosevelt Monument grant. What was it, 6 months?
Through May.
Through May. And they have identified a contractor, so the work actually should be done before then. In addition, I just want to highlight and thank the council for a resolution tonight officially renaming the railroad station, which had the very vanilla name of Tenafly Railroad Station. It now has real panache as the Elizabeth Cady Stanton Rail Station, which helps with some of our branding and things that we've been talking about, and I appreciate the council's approving that recommendation.
Can we make like a ribbon ceremony with a sign and the whole
We
thing?
can do whatever we want.
I would love to see that.
Okay.
Are we gonna
I'd
get
love to
a
hold an
name,
event.
what's the story with a name plaque or
Yeah,
something like
we'll
that?
get name plaque.
And that's when we do the ribbon cutting, yeah.
Sounds,
March 8th?
sounds good to me. Then the planning board met, where they just had resolutions, finalizing approval for Knickerbocker Country Club and for the JCC. Those have been previously voted on and reported back to this council. I also do want to recognize that 2 of the members who have served a long time on the planning board, Ted Kagi and Mark Harrison, are stepping off the board after combined several decades, if you combine their 2 terms, and they will be missed. And so I just want to publicly, as part of my report, thank them for their service and the wonderful job they did. Finally, although, I have to add this, although the Tenafly Presents did not meet, it's a little early for us, I have to report that one of the members of the committee, Rich Parada, who has appeared at concerts in town, jazz, he and a friend of his who's a pianist were nominated for a Grammy for a music arrangement.
Wow.
Good news.
So, yeah, Grammy nominees. We can now, if he ever performs again for us.
Performing at Highland Park.
Huh?
That's cool, performing at Highland Park.
Performing at Highland Park? Grammy nominee, Rich Parada. So I also want to congratulate Rich publicly on that. That's it.
Dad, you're on.
Exactly.
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report. Okay. So we did do business, because of the hour, we have closed sessions. I'm going to skip Mayor's remark. Also, to go on the record again, to thank Mark Slauson for his 32 years of service. So we opened the meeting and closed the meeting that way. Okay, so we're going to go into closed session. You've got to read your statement first, then the rest will vote.
So it's Resolution R21-455 at a regular meeting of the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Tenafly, County, Bergen, State of New Jersey, held on December 14th, 2021. The Mayor and Council of the Borough of Tenafly has deemed it necessary to go into closed session to discuss certain matters which are sensitive from the public. Be it resolved in compliance with NJSA 10:4-12, the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Tenafly are going into closed executive session to discuss the following matters falling within the attorney-client privilege, to the extent the confidentiality is required in order for the attorney to exercise her ethical duties as a lawyer. We have already planned the anticipated contract negotiation for real property. We are adding in now a contract for personnel issues, pending litigation and anticipated litigation.
Can I get a motion to go into closed?
So moved.
Can I get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Location.
Good. See you in closed session.
Who said he was doing
Resolution R21-439 regarding the OPEIU Local 32 contract, noted that a change in the title of the Senior Center Director to be made manager. Okay, can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hold on, can you read the roll call, please?
Councilmember Dayton?
Yes.
Councilmember Grossman?
Yes.
Councilmember Bennett?
Yes.
Councilmember Michaels?
No.
Councilmember Dr. O'Connor?
Yes.
Councilmember Park?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.